We recently launched a new self-service application called Tenant Detective. And Tenant Detective is, in essence, a Microsoft 365 optimization service. In a nutshell, what that means is if you have Microsoft 365 subscriptions and licenses today, our tool, when you give us access, allows us to go in, analyze the subscriptions that you have, compare that against the actual usage of the features that are involved in those subscriptions, and then give you a report back that says, based on what we see, you could save some money by reducing the number and the types of subscriptions that you have, again, matched to the usage of the folks who use the subscriptions in your tenant. We've been doing this for a while with our current clients, in fact, 2 or 3 years, but we've perfected the model and we just recently launched it to the public. So now really anybody can go in and use Tenant Detective to scan their own tenant and get a report back on, hey, is there a chance that we could maybe save some money here by rationalizing what we're buying? And what we're finding is savings in the 20 to 30% range for most of our existing clients and for the folks, new folks that are coming in and using the tool. All that being said, as I mentioned, we've been using this service for a while, but we've always used it with existing customers, people that we already have good relationships with. There's a lot of trust kind of on both sides of the table. Now that we've gone to the, kind of straight to the public, so to speak, we've got folks coming in and using this tool or taking a look at it who they don't know Plow and we don't know them. They've just found us through the internet. And as you can imagine, there's not necessarily a lot of trust built up yet, and there shouldn't be. So they started asking questions, how to use this or why or what might be the implications. And these are all really good questions, the kinds of questions that we think people should ask and that we would probably ask in the other direction if we were looking at a tool like this. So what I thought I'd do today is go through some of those, raise the questions that we're hearing, and then give some answers, just some context. So the first one, we went through this process with someone and they said, I don't really believe the results because I can't see everything. You're giving me this number, that says I'm spending X and I could spend X minus, but I don't really believe it because I can't see the information. And that's a fair objection because we don't share all of that information right out of the gate. But if you come through the process and you see the initial results, all you have to do is ask for a full report, and then we'll get on a call with you and walk you through the detailed findings so that we can show you here's where they're coming from, and down really into the individual user level, we can show you, here's what a user is using today, here's the subscription they have, and here's either the new subscription or the combination of subscriptions that they should have based on their usage. And we can even give you examples, a random sample, if you will, of users to show you those so you can go in and validate it for yourself. So that's one of the primary ways we deal with that question. How do I know for sure if moving to you will save me money? Again, I haven't seen the full recommendations. Am I just supposed to trust you, based on this report and go, yeah, I'll go ahead and give you the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, over my Microsoft 365 tenant? We wouldn't expect you to trust us without getting to know us. The first step is getting the initial report, and that's the self-service module through the web app at tenantdetective.plow.net. Once you get through the first step, there's a big button that says request full report. And once you hit that button, you basically are raising your hand to say, I want to engage in a conversation with you and I want to understand where these results are coming from. And I also want to understand what would be the process I would need to go through if I decide I'd like to capture this savings and I'd like for you to serve as our cloud services provider, which would mean migrating your licenses or subscriptions either from direct purchase from Microsoft or from another CSP. We're not asking you to believe what we share with you right out of the gate. If nothing else, it should be an indicator for you to say, hey, this is maybe something I should take a look at because these guys are at least saying that we could maybe save 20 or 30% or maybe more. But if there's savings there, we're saying it's worth the conversation. As can probably be expected, there are security questions that pop up in this process. And one of the ones we get is, what are you going to do with my data? For us to be able to generate a report for you to run our algorithms, we have to have access to your Microsoft 365 tenant, which means we do have access to your usage data inside that world. Now, it's usage data like volume of emails, Teams messages, are you using OneDrive? That's the sort of data that we have. But it's absolutely true that we would have access to that data, and we would also need to know the email addresses of the folks inside your tenant so that we can give specific recommendations. That's sensitive data, we understand that. We have a policy where we basically destroy the data for anyone who runs through Tenant Detective after 30 days if they haven't decided to engage in a full report, ongoing evaluation process with us. So we're going to purge the data after 30 days, so we won't keep it. Now we do that for your benefit, obviously, because we don't want sensitive data sitting around in our system if you're not becoming a client. And secondarily, we don't want to pay to keep it either because it's not doing us any good. So there's benefits all around for purging that data. So that's what we do with the data after that 30-day mark. If I do ask for this full report, what does that mean? What do I get? What you get when you go through the self-service portion is really a summary of the savings and the types of savings that we're finding, right? So whether those are unused licenses or defunct users or subscription optimizations and even some compliance needs that you might be missing that we find. Those are sort of the big buckets from the summary report that you will see in the self-service module. When you get to the full report, you'll engage with one of our team members who's really familiar with Microsoft 365. They'll present the full report findings, which is literally a per user breakdown of every one of the users inside your tenant in terms of the before and after, and also the specific data elements for that individual that led to the new recommendation. We'll also even go over here's what the post-optimization subscription landscape would look like, so you can see the difference between where you are today versus where we're recommending you go. And sometimes that can be quite different depending on the nature of the licenses that you have. So that's really what a full report is. That's the report itself. And again, what I'm describing really is a process. So someone from our team will walk you through the full report, also ask you some questions, because it could be that you're wanting to do some things with your Microsoft environment that you haven't done yet, or you might like to think about doing some things like, well, what if we wanted to roll out Intune? Or what if we're not using conditional access today, but we'd like to? We can do a customized version of your optimization based on those parameters if you tell us those. And so that's part of the full report process, if you will, would be making sure that whatever recommendations we give you address usage-based changes where you are today, that's looking backwards, and then as well as addressing any sort of forward-looking changes you might want to handle. How can we be overspending so much? Does my IT team not know what they're doing? Or does my 365 administrator not know what they're doing? It's a fair question in terms I understand why people are asking it, but it's the wrong question to ask, because we wouldn't have spent the time and effort on this if what we hadn't found in this process is that managing a decent size Microsoft 365 tenant in terms of optimizing it from a cost perspective matched to usage is basically impossible without software. There is no way for an individual administrator or team of administrators, frankly, to be able to buy the right kinds of subscriptions for users based on usage, because they don't know what their usage is. If they're not intimately familiar with the Graph API and actually pulling the raw data from Microsoft and then analyzing that, there's no way they can do what we're doing. So don't look at this as, well, this is an indictment of my Microsoft 365 admin team. That's why we're overspending, is because they're just not good at their job. That's completely wrong. That's not the case at all. In fact, what we find is they're doing the best job that they possibly can, particularly in larger tenants, 100, 500, couple thousand users and up, and they're really overwhelmed with trying to match up the right kinds of subscriptions to their users' needs. One of the key sort of security questions that we get and that we're seeing pretty regularly is, what is this read-only access thing? It looks like access to a lot of stuff, and that makes people nervous. And we understand that. I guess I'd start by saying the first point, which is read-only access, right? We do not have the ability to make any changes in your environment with the permissions that you're giving us. It only allows us to read the information that's there so that we can then analyze it. And if you look at what we have access to, yes, it's a lot of items, but it's all items related to and only related to your users' use of Microsoft 365. That's the nature of the access that we're asking for. And again, I want to emphasize that it's read-only. So we don't have the ability to change anything. You're not opening yourselves up to mischief inside your tenant.